All right, hello. Welcome to those of you that are logging in now. If you're here for the EV Charging 101 webinar with Alameda Municipal Power and Frontier Energy, you're in the right place. Give a couple seconds for those that are still logging in, but in the meantime, if you would like to share your name and where you live, what part of Alameda you're in, feel free to share that in the chat box. We would love to know if you are a current EV owner or if you're planning or looking into buying an EV. Just give us a little information about you in the chat box. I see the number still climbing, so give everyone a couple more seconds before we get started. But welcome and thank you for being here. All right, I see the number still going up, but if you're here for the EV Charging 101 webinar, you're in the right place. We'll get started in just a few seconds, but in the meantime, please share your name and where you live and whether you have an EV or if you're looking to buying an EV in the chat box so we can all get to know each other a little bit. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started now. Thank you to those that are here. My name's Shelby. I work for Alameda Municipal Power. I'm a utility analyst here. And then we have Chris here from Frontier Energy who will be presenting as well. So I'll go ahead and get started with a little bit of background about Alameda Municipal Power. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a little bit about AMP. AMP was established in 1887. We are the oldest municipal electric utility here in the state. This benefits our customers because we are community owned and locally controlled by our Public Utilities Board. Some highlights about Alameda Municipal Power: we are 100% clean energy, which makes it even more beneficial for EV owners to charge at home because your transportation is truly zero emission versus going into some of the neighboring communities with other utilities and charging, at work or elsewhere outside of Alameda. We also have 20% lower electricity rates than our neighboring utilities. And we are a demonstrated leader in building and transportation electrification programs. So I'll go ahead and pass it off. I believe, Chris, the next slide's for you.
It is for me. Thanks so much, Shelby, and welcome to everybody who has joined us. You are in listen-only mode today, and so that chat box is going to be the way that you talk to Heather, to Shelby and me. So please find it in the list of all of those little go-to menu things and let us know how you're doing tonight. I am going to ask you some questions, and hopefully you'll be able to type your answers in the chat box. And then you can either use the questions or the chat box to ask questions for Shelby and me as well. So I said in the chat, I'm Chris, and I actually live in Sacramento, but I've been working with utilities like AMP for almost 20 years now to get electric cars out on the road. So I used to work with them before they were cool, and everybody asked, what's that weird thing that you're driving? Well, my first question for all of you, get ready with that chat box, is a little bit of a game. I'm going to show you a picture here and ask you to pick two of these that are electric vehicles. And if you head down to that chat box and you can just type the number of the car or the SUV of the two that you think are EVs. Or you can just lean over and tell your cat, dog, child, or a partner who is sitting there with you. Seeing no answers, I will tell you that they are all electric vehicles. We think some folks who are just new to EVs think that we're really talking about a small car with a limited range and you can only put groceries in the front seat and there's no room in the trunk. And as you can see, the EVs that are on the market now and coming are all shapes and sizes. And we're seeing more and more of them introduced every day. Well, you may already know quite a bit about electric cars, have one, think about buying one, but the question that most people have is about really what's the difference between them. And so an electric vehicle is one that always runs on electricity and you plug it into your to charge. Most of them are in the range of 100 to 250 miles. Typically, the more the car costs, the longer range it has. And now we're seeing the first set of vehicles come out with near 300-mile range. A plug-in hybrid, the other type of EV, is one that has both electricity and gasoline, or even E85 to run on. They typically have between 15 and 40 all-electric miles, and then that gas engine will kick on. And for most people, that 15 to 40 miles is going to be your daily commute. I have friends who are driving plug-in hybrids, and they have not put gas in their tank, some of them for months. And if you're in that boat and you're driving a plug-in hybrid, you do want to refresh your gasoline occasionally because it will go stale if you're never using it. So let's talk a little bit about how you put fuel into that EV. If you think about the way that you get gas today at a gas station, it's really on the go. For most people, they're driving to a gas station that is between their home or their work and their destination, whether that's a store or you're going to work or school or returning home. It's a very quick stop for most of us who are filling with gas. It's less than 10 minutes. And there is really just one way to do it. You can go to almost every gas station in the world and it always works the same. Now you may be in Oregon where they fill the tank for you, but it's still very much the same process. There's not something new that you have to learn or a funny dance that you have to do to make the gas pump turned on. Well, electric vehicles are a little bit different. Instead of thinking about fueling on the go, you're fueling where you rest. So you're really looking for that place that you're parking for as short as 20 minutes to as long as overnight. And unlike gas, there is not just one way to do it. There are several ways, and absolutely none of them require that you do a funny dance. So one way to think about, before we jump in, I want to hit you with a few useful terms. Like everything else, EVs and charging stations have their own little secret language. And I try really hard to stay away from the acronyms, but sometimes they creep out. So a couple of things you might hear me say or hear others say is an EVSE, which is just the fancy way of saying the charging station. You'll also hear people talk about smart charging or dumb charging. A dumb charger is the one that just charges your car. It doesn't really have any built-in intelligence. A smart charger is one that, among other things, can interact with AMP and other utilities. It can even, some of them can even choose for you when your rate is lowest and charge your car during that low time. Dwell time is the time that your car is sitting parked. So it's kind of like its resting period. And then you may hear us talk about ports on a charging station. That's number of plugs. Some of them have one, some of them have two. Kilowatts and kilowatt hours are pretty standard with electricity, but we talk about a kilowatt, which is the measurement of electricity, and a kilowatt hour, which is the amount of kilowatts that a device uses when it's plugged in for an hour. It's a little bit like gallons of gasoline and miles per gallon. It's two different ways of measuring the same unit. So now let's talk about our charging levels. And this is the first thing where you see a little bit difference. Level 1 charging is just the plug in your garage. Every electric vehicle comes with a cord that's already part of the car. You can plug one end of it into the car and one end of it into any socket. Now, if it is out in the garage or outside, we do recommend that you're looking at an outdoor rated socket, one that can withstand getting wet and is a little bit more rugged. It charges very slowly. For every hour that you're plugged in, it gives you about 4 to 6 miles of range. So what I want you to put in your head is this thought of a kiddie pool in your backyard. And you're going to fill up that kiddie pool. That kiddie pool is your battery. If you're filling it up with a level 1 charge, you're kind of filling it up with a kitchen faucet. It's going to take you a long time to do it. Now, there are also EVSEs, that electric vehicle service equipment, that's a level 1 charger, and it's a special different unit, but it still just plugs into your household current. There's nothing really fancy that you need to buy or do. Now, level 2 charging is using the garden hose to fill up that kiddie pool. So you're getting faster current come through. It can be just a special plug in the wall, very similar to what you would do for a dryer. So it's more electricity coming through that plug. But for the most part, people buy an EVSE, something that mounts on the wall or is freestanding when you see them out in a parking lot. That's going to give you anywhere from 10 miles of range to 24 miles of range per hour charged in. Why do we have that big difference? Well, they actually pass through the kilowatts at different speeds. They have different amps. And the higher the amps, the faster it's pouring that current through. Now we're at DC fast charging, and that's filling up the kiddie pool with the fire hose. It's very fast. It's very high current. It is always a freestanding device. I am not aware of anybody having one at their home. They usually have multiple connectors. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And then when you see them out in public, you're always going to pay to use them. I shouldn't say that. I just found one that was free the other day. You have to pay a lot to park in their parking garage, but it is a free charge if you pay that lot. And you can get a full charge in 40 minutes, sometimes as long as 60, sometimes as short as 20. Again, it kind of depends upon the speed that that current is flowing through into your car. So those are your charging levels. In most homes, level 2 charging is common. At most workplaces, at most apartment buildings, we're going to see level 2 charging. So let's talk about those charging locations. And remember, I said gas is always on the go. Electricity is where you're parked. So you can think about 4 different places typically that you park. Most people are charging their vehicles at home right now. In fact, about 80% of people who have an EV are using some type of home charging, whether that's that plug or whether they're charging at a rental housing or even a multifamily dwelling. So they're leaving the house in the morning with a full charge. Then we see our second common place is at workplace charging. That's where you might go to work at Kaiser Permanente and they have chargers in the parking lot, or some of the high-tech companies have quite a few chargers. And those folks are typically parked there for 2 to 4 hours, enough to fill their batteries. And then oftentimes you'll see people swapping cars in the middle of the day to make sure everybody's got enough charge to get back home again. Then we have destination charging. That's the charger that you see in the Walmart parking lot, or you might see at a restaurant or in the parking lot of the stadium. Those are the places that you want to take your car and go visit. I will tell you, we're seeing a lot of destinations start to put in charging stations, and I'm talking about hotels and wineries and places where you want to go visit to make sure that you're able to drive your electric car there. In fact, there's quite an initiative right now with our national parks to install charging so that you can drive your EV the next time that you go to Yosemite. And then our last piece of charging is en route charging, and that's that DC fast charger. That's when you need a little bit to get going on your way home. My coworker, Thomas, lives in Tucson, Arizona, and he was just here visiting our office in Sacramento. He drives a Tesla, so he needed to do en route charging on the way home. And I just asked him, how much did that add to your trip? Because Tucson to Sacramento is a long drive. Honestly, I don't know why he didn't fly, but he wanted to drive. And he said with the charging stops that he needed to make, it was only 20 to 30 minutes at each stop, and it was really well timed. It was just about the time that he needed to get out of the vehicle and take a break. And so he was able to make that entire trip from Tucson to Sacramento And it really only added about an hour to what he had planned to do anyway. And the big bonus of it is that it didn't cost him anything, which is great considering what gasoline costs right now. So let's talk a little bit about charging at home. And I mentioned that wall outlet. You've got that. Cord comes with the car. There's no extra cost for that. If you want to install that NEMA plug, that dryer plug, it's about an extra $500 to have one of those installed by an electrician. And that will give you a full charge overnight. But you're always want to, this is a great great use of charging for people who typically have very low miles on their cars, have charging at work or the destination that they're going to, or have cars that sit for 8 to 10 hours overnight. The next level up for your home is that level 2 charger. And you're going to see some examples of how that goes up. And an EVSE, the unit itself, is somewhere between $350 and $500, plus there's the cost of installation. And when I turn things back over to Shelby, she's going to talk to you about the rebates that are available from AMP to help offset that cost. So the level 2 charger, the change in price has to do with that smartness. The more cool features you're buying, the more ability you're giving it to be automated and to pick the best time of day for you to charge. You're going to pay a little bit more for that automation. So when you're thinking about putting the EVSE in your house or at your apartment, there's some things I really want you to think about. And that first is that the further away it is from your electric panel, that really impacts your installation cost, because that is going to hook directly into your electric panel. We'll talk about that in a minute as well. And then has to go through some conduit to where that box is going to be, that charging station will be. So if your panel is upstairs on the 3rd floor in the back bathroom and you're going to charge your car in the driveway, the electrician's going to let you know how much that costs to run that. So I really want you to think about how far away you are from the panel when you're installing that EVSE. The next thing is that you need to have room to walk around the car. And the picture of the lady in the car there is actually someone that I know. And you can see that she just barely has enough room to open up her car door in her garage. And she had to install the EVSE on the outside of the building in order to be able to plug it into the car. So think about how much room you have there. And then I think the really important thing is to think about the tripping hazards. I've seen a lot of installations where that cord runs across the sidewalk, as you can see with the little girl there, or is between the walkway of the car. I worry about this guy with the groceries, that he's going to get his foot hung up in that cord. There are some creative solutions to all of these. And I love some of these, and these are actually real pictures. They are not clip art or things that I pulled off. And you can see in the top picture how that Clipper Creek charger is installed right between the doors of the garage, and no tripping hazard there. We see a couple of overhead installations, and I just saw this week someone who is making a combination garage door opener and car charging station, and that's pretty clever. And then there are also small, ways to fit them into nice tiny spots. As you can see, the guy with the ladder did not have a whole lot of wall space, but he also put that in so that the cord is draped up off the floor, not hanging across the floor. So these are great examples of some of the ways to install it in the garage, and your electrician is going to help you. The electrician will make sure that it's installed properly, safely, and as at least cost as possible. But what if you're outside? You don't have a place in the garage, like my friend with the teeny tiny garage. So this is my friend with the teeny tiny garage right here, and you can see how it was mounted on the side of her garage. Her car plugs near the back, so she was able to squeeze out her door and then get to that car charging station and charge it while she's still in her garage. And then on the left, you see 2 chargers that were installed on the outside of garage where people can use them. And these are pictures that Clipper Creek provided me. They're just one of many charging station vendors. And then these are a couple other pictures from Clipper Creek for places that didn't have garages at all. And you can see that this person built a really attractive, like little box to put their charger in. And it almost looks like it's a birdhouse on this box. And then over here, we have the charging station installed on the fence. So lots of clever ways to do that. So before I move on, I want to ask if you have any questions, anything that you'd like to type into the chat that Shelby or I can answer for you about home charging and types of chargers. And Shelby's going to give you a link in just a few minutes so you can explore some home charging on your own.
Hey, Chris, sorry to interrupt. I think there might be an issue with the chat box. Someone brought to my attention that they weren't able to send a chat. I also noticed
Oh,
I can't chat the attendees. I can only chat you. So,
oh,
um,
interesting. So I do
not sure.
see in the question box, thank you so much for saying that. I see a question um, that says just the word outlet. Oh, only the question box is working. All right. Thank you so much for telling me that. I have to admit I'm new on this GoToMeeting platform, and Shelby and I did not test that out earlier. So, Jean, go ahead and ask your question. If you could drop it into the chat box. I don't have a way to unmute you. All right, well, I am, Shelby, if you could scroll through that and let me know if there's something there. So let's talk a little bit about the installation checklist. The first thing that you're going to want to do is check your electric panel. And for most of us, it's that gray box in the garage or maybe on the outside of the house. And you're looking for open slots like this. The charging station, not just the plug, but the charging station, the EVSE, is going to go on its own breaker. And if your breaker is full, if you don't have any room there in the panel, you're first going to talk to AMP and they're going to work that through with you and figure out how to do that. And Shelby, maybe since we only have the question box, if you could drop that email address into the question box, and then I'll also I can put it in the chat later.
So
So
I don't have access to the question box. I
that
think,
is easy. Okay,
yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry. So I appreciate your patience with all of that. So we will get you that email address as we finish up here for you to be able to, so you'll have that. The other thing that you're going to do is, the next thing you're going to do is purchase that EVSE. And we'll give you the link to the AMP marketplace. You can buy it directly through AMP and see the different options that are available. Then you'll contact the electrician. The electrician may be able to give you a quote for installation right over the phone, or by even putting some pictures in. So what should I look for when buying a home EV charger? There are many types with various costs from a few hundred to a few thousands. That's very true. And that range of cost is largely going to be on the features of the EVSE. So the ones that are in the hundreds are those dumb chargers, the ones that don't have built-in intelligence. They don't talk to your Google Home device or your Alexa. And the more money that you're spending more for additional features that will help you manage electricity, program your car to charge when you're away from home, give you lots of information and data. So the other part of the cost is the installation. If you're doing something that is unique, like that overhead charger we saw, you're going to spend a little bit more money for those uniqueness. I will tell you that the real cost is more in the installation, and that goes back to that further away from the panel, the more you're going to see in the cost of that. So you can install the charging station yourself. If you are a really good electrician and are comfortable with electricity, it's a DIY installation. It still requires a permit, and you'll see that on the city website. They have a load calculation that you need to do that just says this is how much energy I have available and this is how much energy I'm going to use. Then they will grant you the permit. The permit costs a few $100. Then you'll install the breaker, the wiring, the conduit, and the charging station. And then you'll want to make sure that the inspector, city inspector, comes out just to make sure that everything is done correctly before you use it for the first time. So you have two choices there. If you know electricity, go with the DIY, make sure you get the permit. If you don't know electricity, I hate working with electricity, use the electrician. So let's talk about charging away from home. And I mentioned early, 2 levels. Level 2 charging, you'll see those commonly at work or at a destination. And all EVs and PHEVs can use level 2 charging. The DC fast charging gives you that fast 20 minutes to an hour charging. Most EVs now take DC fast charging. There are some of the older ones that are not capable of DC fast charging, and no plug-in hybrids are capable of DC fast charging. So one of the things to think about if you're looking at a used EV is to make sure that it is DC fast charging capable. And that's just a question you ask for your dealership. So these are some examples of public charging stations. And you can see that they all look a little different. One of the places that I go to is a parking garage, and they're all hanging on the wall. Typically, they will take a credit card for payment, or you can pay with your phone app, and some have a RFID card that you can scan, but they have multiple ways to pay. And public charging is paid for by the kilowatt. Now, for level 2 charging, it is regulated by the state of California that they all charge by the kilowatt. It is up to the owner of that station to decide what to charge, just like it's up to the owner of the gas station to decide what to charge. But just like a gas station, they're pretty competitive with each other to make sure that they are staying the same way. They are staying within a few cents of each other. DC fast charging is a little bit different. They charge by the kilowatt hour, but you may also have a startup fee. In a few places, they charge a parking fee. They might charge you 5 cents a minute while you're plugged in, and then $1 a minute if you're done charging and still parked there. The AMP has a public charging station finder, and when I'm done talking, I will give you the link to that as well. I have lots of links I'm going to give you when I'm done talking. And that tells you where the public charging stations are. And as you click into it, will also tell you which maker it is: ChargePoint, EVgo, Electrify America, and it will also give you the cost to charge at those stations. Even though I'm talking about cost, what I want you to know is it costs a lot less. Oh, I got ahead of myself. DC fast charging has a little bit of its own secret language. There are 3 types of connectors that are on a DC fast charging. Tesla connectors only fit Tesla cars. Tesla cars have an adapter that can use the other connectors, but it doesn't go the other way. The other 2 are called CCS, and that great name of CHAdeMO. And one day there will only be one, but for now there are 2. Some vehicles, particularly the Japanese cars, use the CHAdeMO connector. The other use the CCS. Most DC fast chargers, like the one in this picture, have both. There are also different speeds. You'll see in this picture, the CCS one says 150 kilowatts, and the CHAdeMO says 50 kilowatts. That's how fast it's putting those electrons into your car. However, just because the dispenser says 150 doesn't mean your battery takes 150. So every automaker has kind of a governor on that. So your car will only charge as fast as the battery acceptance rate. And that's something when you go buy the car will be very clear to you. It will tell you what your charging acceptance rate is. The other thing to know with DC fast charging is the price can change. So hopefully everybody is familiar with peak pricing and off-peak pricing, and that's something you get in your time of use rate. Well, these DC fast charging stations, some of them will charge you more if you're charging during peak. And that's usually from 4 to 7. Shelby, is that when your peak is, 4 to 7?
Ours is
So
5 to 9 on weekdays.
5 to 9 on weekdays. So from 5 to 9 at some DC fast chargers, you may pay a little bit more. There are some networks that will also reward you for charging in the middle of the day by charging you significantly less. So think about that just a little bit. However, no matter how you pay for it, it is so much cheaper than gas. Now this chart is a recent chart from the National Renewable Energy Lab, who monitors these things, about what it's costing per kilowatt to charge. I can give you the example. I looked this up just the other day. It's a few $100s a year to charge an EV, and compared to about $3,000 average to fill with gas. And right now they're saying with the price of gasoline, it's more like $5,000 to fill with gas. So it is significantly less money that you spend on fuel. Oh, and I even put it on this slide. So let's talk a little bit about what ifs, because we hear a lot of what ifs. When I first started driving electric cars, the car that I had a range of about 50 miles. I live 2.5 miles from my office. I live in a really small area and I don't go very far. But even at 50 miles, I freaked out. It was like, oh my gosh, I can't go to the grocery store. It's surprising how comfortable you become understanding exactly how far your car can go. And what really made me think about it is being on a half or a quarter tank of gas. When I was driving a gas car, I was one of those people who used to see how far below the empty line I could go before I actually needed it. I drove a Chevy Equinox for a while that had GM OnStar, and the OnStar lady used to call me and ask me if I needed directions to a gas station. So even at a 50 miles in my old car, you get really comfortable with that. Now my car has about 250 miles and I don't charge it every day. You know, you get really used to that once you're comfortable with where you can charge and how long it takes. People get worried about the fuel availability. What if it's not working or it's not there or I can't find one? Most cars have a Finder app now, so you really know where they are. There are many apps on your phone that you can pinpoint them. The smart public charging stations will even tell you if they're free or in use. But the really important thing to think about is you're charged when you're parked. So look for the place that you're going to be for an hour to buy groceries, or that you're going to watch a concert, or going somewhere where you know you're going to have dinner and rest. And those are the places that you have an opportunity to top off your battery. We also hear a lot about how weather really decreases the range of vehicles. And that is true if you live in an Arctic area. If you're living in a place with extreme weather, which is not us in Northern California, you will see a variation. For us in Northern California, running the heater or AC in our coldest cold days and our hottest hot days really doesn't make much impact. I really hate the cold. It's a nice sunny day in Sacramento and I am sitting here in 2 sweaters and I have a blanket on my lap. So in the winter, I have the seat heater on and I blast my heater and it really changes my range by maybe 30 miles a week. So you'll get used to exactly where those differences are. I don't hear safety so much anymore, but people do worry about what happens if you get rear-ended or or sideswiped. It is as safe as every other car and every other fuel. These vehicles have all gone through crash testing, safety testing, and fire departments have been thoroughly trained on how to react when they see any alternative fuel vehicle that may be involved in an incident. How about towing a boat, towing the camper, towing your generator behind you? Not yet. Um, Vehicles that can tow are coming. They're coming soon. We're seeing the first pickup trucks coming out, and Chevy has just announced a Blazer and a Silverado. So we're going to see those coming. I will tell you that towing a heavy load behind the car is going to decrease your range. It decreases your range with gasoline too. We just don't notice it quite as much. But for now, you are going to need a different car to tow your boat and camper. And then Shelby mentioned emissions. People talk about what's the overall effect? With AMP's 100% renewable electricity rate, it is super clean energy. But even if you were going to Utah and filling your car up with electricity that's made from coal, I want you to think about driving your gas car. The emissions is like a basketball. And when you're driving it on anything other, you get that down to the size of a ping pong ball or a golf ball and even smaller. Those little balls are so much smaller than the basketball. That's what we're really looking for, is to get to that point. So I would say it's just like everything else that's new. If you're my age, and I'm sorry I can't see you all, you remember when we first started getting cell phones and how scary it was to not have a landline at the house anymore. And you know, you have to overcome those what ifs and gain experience and gain practicality, and you'll see that it is far more useful than having a landline. So I think we're going to pass it over to Shelby. I will drop those links into the chat while she's talking, and she's going to talk to you a little bit more about what AMP can do to help you get into an EV and help you get into charging your car at home or at work. So over to you, Shelby.
Thank you. Like the next steps page just said, check out AMP's very generous EV rebates. We have quite a few to offer. First being a level 2 EV charger. This is a rebate for $800. It requires, a permit, installation, a receipt, like an invoice from the charger, and then we provide the $800 rebate afterwards. We also have a used EV rebate. It's $2,000 to $3,000 for income qualifying customers. The only requirement with that is that the used EV be $22,000 or less. There are a bunch of other state and federal incentives. We have them listed all throughout our website on our electric vehicle webpage. It's linked right there, although I know you can't access the link through the presentation. We will be sending out the slides and a recording of this webinar afterwards, so you'll be able to access the link through that. We also offer EV rebates for multifamily properties. It's up to $48,000, $8,000 per charger, up to 6 chargers. This is for multifamily buildings with a minimum of 4 units. And we also have a commercial EV charger rebate, and that's for up to $36,000. Next slide, please. Sorry. AMP also offers an EV time of use rate plan for our electric vehicle owners. This is made to incentivize charging at home during the off-peak hours. I know we kind of mentioned this earlier in the presentation, but the on-peak hours are weekdays, 5 to 9 p.m. That will be at 50 cents per kilowatt hour, whereas the off-peak time will be at 13 cents per kilowatt hour. So it really incentivizes you to shift your consumption outside of those hours to really provide savings on your bill, because charging at home obviously will increase your bill because you're consuming more than before, but with this time of use rate plan, it helps lower the cost over time. Next slide, please. And I know Chris touched upon this before about finding a charger, but on AMP's website, when you go to alamedamp.com, at the top of the page, there's an electric vehicle tab, and that will lead you to the screen that you see here on the presentation slide. We have all sorts of resources on this page, one of them being the charger finder. This is specific to Alameda. And as you can see on there, it identifies all the areas on the island that you can charge your car. The first one you see right there, Alameda Municipal Power, that's where our office is. We do have DC fast chargers outside. They are free to the public for use. So if you are at the in-between process after purchasing an EV where you don't yet have a charger at home, this is a great resource for our customers to come and charge for free. But next slide, please. So yeah, these are the next steps. We kind of briefly talked about these earlier, but go to alamedamp.com. Under the sustainability tab, we have a list of all of our rebates and incentives, and that's where you can find the EV incentives and see what you are eligible for. If you are interested in signing up for the EV time of use rate plan, that is also on our website under the customer service tab. But if you have any general questions about electric vehicles, whether it be the time of use rate plan or our rebates or anything in general, you can always contact us via email. The electric vehicle email inbox is ev@alamedamp.com. And again, I know I don't have access to the chat for everyone, but we will send that out in the follow-up email where we give you the recording and the slides. So I think the next slide, is that the last slide? I think. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, we're happy to take any questions now. I think Chris has access to those questions that are coming in. So yeah, we'll get started on those. And like I said, if you have any follow-up questions afterwards, you can always email AMP at the EV inbox.
It is. And so thanks so much. And I did drop links into the chat. So hopefully you can see those links and click on those links. And just a couple of questions that I see in here is the first one is about, is it okay to top off the battery? It's not like the old NiCad batteries that didn't lose capacity. No, the batteries have some built-in intelligence and they won't let you charge them up too much or let them run too low. Now, I will tell you, if the car is just sitting in the garage or sitting, for instance, at the airport for 2 weeks while you're gone, it is going to continue to use a little bit of the battery because there are some reporting tools that are going on inside the car, but you won't see that much. But yes, you can charge it up every day. It also used to be in the early cars that if you did DC fast charging all the time, you were like being kind of mean to your battery. That's not true anymore either. They've really done some great jobs in managing how the battery uses the energy. And Joyce asked if you, Shelby, could you please repeat the email address?
Yes, the email is EV, so just the first letters of electric vehicle, at Alameda MP, so M as in Mary, P as in Paul, .com. So EV@alamedamp.com.
Thank you. And then we also had a question about installing charging station in multi-unit dwellings. That is really something that AMP is wants to work closely with you to install charging stations in multi-unit dwellings or multifamily dwellings. And Gina, I have a whole separate presentation about that. I'm not sure if you're a resident or an owner of an apartment building or a condo. We would definitely love to talk to you about that, and we will certainly follow up and answer those questions. If the answer is, can you do it? If the question is, can you do it? The answer is yes. And there are some really great units that are actually being designed to fit nicely into parking spaces at multifamily dwellings. And there are also some electricians out there who specialize in just doing multifamily charging. Okay, please speak to the use of an orange outlet. That is not what I'm familiar with, and I apologize about that. I'll look that up and get some answers for you. And now I do see people are telling us that they're owners of cars. That's awesome. Oh, Jean, thanks for giving us your email address. We can totally follow up with you. All right. Any other questions that Shelby or I might answer for you? So I do want to mention, and I should have looked this up ahead of time, with Earth Day this weekend, many EV groups or sustainability groups are doing EV ride and drives this weekend. And please take a look, take an opportunity to go out and drive one and see how it feels for yourself. I am also going to put into the questions, I'll put it here. If you can see the questions, I am also dropping in my email address. You are welcome to contact me. And it's actually in the answer to Deborah's question. I didn't realize that. But you are welcome to contact me. I've been working with cities and utilities and property owners and grocery store chains and all sorts of folks to put in EV charging around the state and to really just learn more and get the most out of their EVs. So with that, Shelby, any closing comments?
No, that was all for me. Thank you all for attending.
We sure appreciate your time, and I'm going to stay on for a few minutes. So if there is anything else that pops into your head and you'd like to ask, I will stick around until everybody's gone. And with that, we just really appreciate you spending a little time with us tonight. And thanks so much. And I just see Jan typed in a question. Do the chargers have to be outside, not in the garage? They can totally be in the garage. It's wherever it works best for you. Thanks so much, everybody, and we'll be following up with the recording of this webinar, and the links, and all of the other information that we promised you. Oh, and I will stop sharing my screen. All right, I think everybody is signing off. I see no more questions.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Shelby. You were awesome.
Thanks, you too. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.